Korangal Valley, Afghanistan, 1430 hours. The world was ending in fire and stone. The harsh crack of a sniper round sent fragments of granite exploding inches from Lieutenant Marcus Razor Carter's face. He pressed himself deeper into the shallow depression the radio clutched in his white-knuckled grip as the voice of impending doom crackled through. 80% casualties expected. Cannot evac. Cannot provide air support. The Pentagon voice was clinically detached, as if already writing their obituaries. 81 men of SEAL Team 7 and their support elements lay pinned in a valley that had transformed from mission objective to killing field in less than 20 minutes. Carter ran a hand over his face, leaving a smear of blood from a cut above his eye. His voice remained measured, betraying none of the desperation clawing at his insides. Base, this is Trident Actual. We are surrounded on 3 ridge lines. Heavy weapons on high ground. We have wounded, ammunition critical. Estimate 14 minutes before we're overrun. The reply came flat rehearsed. Negative on close air support. All available air assets cannot engage within 100 meters of friendly positions. Terrain makes extraction impossible. Carter looked across the small clearing where his men had taken what little cover existed. Good men. Brave men. Men with families who would soon receive folded flags if nothing changed. Then, cutting through the static and the gunfire, a new voice broke in. Female. Young. Determined. Razor, this is Thunderbolt 3. Hold position. I'm inbound. ETA 12 minutes. The commander's eyes widened, his attention snapping to the radio as if it had burst into flames. Thunderbolt 3, who authorized your launch? This is danger close. No air support is cleared for this operation. A brief pause, then the calm, steady reply. Sometimes the rule book needs a rewrite. Mark your positions with IR. I'll be on your shoulder in 11 minutes now. For the first time in hours, Carter felt something dangerous ignite in his chest. Hope. 36 hours earlier, Bagram Air Base, Afghanistan. The early morning briefing room hummed with the quiet authority of men who commanded death from above. Maps of the Korangal Valley sprawled across touchscreens. Targeting officers marked compounds with digital precision. Squadron commanders nodded at intelligence assessments. At the back of the room, Captain Emma Mitchell stood with her arms crossed, watching. At 26, she was the youngest A-10 pilot in the squadron and one of only 3 women. Her flight suit hung slightly loose on her athletic frame, her blonde hair pulled back in a regulation bun that did nothing to soften the intensity of her gaze. Major James Reynolds, the squadron commander, pointed to a narrow ravine on the digital map. Insertion here. SEAL Team 7 will move under cover of darkness to this compound. F-16s will be on station for the duration with 2 Apache gunships in reserve. Emma stepped forward, her finger tracing a line along a ridge overlooking the ravine. Sir, these elevated positions here and here provide perfect overwatch of the entire approach. If I were setting an ambush, that's exactly where I'd place heavy weapons. Reynolds barely glanced up. Thank you for your input, Mitchell. The terrain creates a natural funnel, she continued undeterred. If they meet resistance, there's no cover for 300 meters in any direction. The room fell silent. Reynolds straightened the map's blue glow, casting harsh shadows across his weathered face. Captain Mitchell, which part of your 3-month deployment qualifies you to second-guess a mission planned by men who've spent their careers in this region? Emma held his gaze. With respect, sir, terrain analysis doesn't care about time and country. Physics is physics. Ballistics is ballistics. Reynolds' jaw tightened. You'll be handling logistics for this operation, Captain. I need experienced pilots for the combat element. The dismissal stung, but Emma maintained her composure. Yes, sir. She turned to leave as the briefing continued without her. Outside in the corridor, her steps echoed against concrete walls adorned with squadron patches and memorial plaques. Names and dates of men who never came home. He's wrong, you know. The voice stopped her, deep graveled by age and cigarettes. Emma turned to find Colonel William Wild Bill Harrison leaning against the wall, arms crossed over his chest. At 67, the retired A-10 pilot now served as a technical advisor, his leathery skin and silver hair testament to decades under unforgiving skies. Colonel Harrison. Bill, he corrected. I gave up on formalities about the same time I started collecting Social Security. Despite herself, Emma smiled. Forgetting proper address could become a habit, one I can't afford right now. Harrison pushed away from the wall, falling into step beside her. Reynolds is a good officer, methodical, by the book, but the book wasn't written for the Korangal. They walked in silence past the flight line where massive A-10 Thunderbolts sat in revetments, their distinctive silhouettes unmistakable, even under canvas covers. The aircraft weren't pretty. Their designers had prioritized function over form building around the massive GAU-8A Avenger cannon rather than trying to make it fit. The result was an aircraft that looked like it had been assembled backward the cockpit, an afterthought behind the enormous gun. Harrison nodded toward the planes. You fly the 297 when they let me, which isn't often. She's a good bird. I know her history. Emma glanced at him. You've flown her, not her specifically, but I knew her sister ships well enough. Harrison paused, studying Emma's face. You look like him, you know. The comment caught her off guard. Excuse me, your father, Jack Mitchell. You have his eyes, same intensity. Emma stopped walking. Few people on base made the connection, and fewer spoke of it. You knew my father. Harrison's weathered face creased into a sad smile. Flew with him, Desert Storm, back when you were just learning to walk. The revelation hung between them, a thread connecting past to present. Emma had been 16 when her father's A-10 went down during a search and rescue mission in Iraq. The details had been sparse: the ceremony at Arlington Perfunctory, a folded flag, and a grateful nation's condolences. Why haven't you said anything before now? She asked. Wasn't sure you'd want the connection made public. Not everyone appreciates living in shadows. Emma considered this. Did you know I was here at Bagram? I requested the assignment when I saw your name on the deployment roster. Harrison held up a hand when she began to protest. Not to watch over you, to see what Jack's daughter made of herself. And he'd be proud, but also worried. You've got his stubbornness, too. Emma resumed walking, processing this unexpected link to her father. Major Reynolds thinks I'm too emotional, too untested. Reynolds thinks everyone under 40 is too emotional, Harrison replied. Come with me. There's something you should see. The base museum occupied a converted hangar at the far end of the flight line. During daylight hours, it served as a morale booster for troops and a propaganda piece for visiting dignitaries. Now, in the quiet hours before dawn, it stood empty, save for the ghosts of wars past. Harrison used his security badge to bypass the main entrance, leading Emma through dimly lit displays of aircraft parts, uniforms, and photographs. He stopped before a glass case containing a battered flight helmet. Operation Instant Thunder, he said, pointing to a faded photograph beside the helmet. The opening air campaign of Desert Storm. Your father and I flew the first A-10 sortie. The image showed two pilots standing before an A-10 desert sand swirling around them. One was unmistakably a younger Harrison. The other, with his arms slung over Harrison's shoulder, was Jack Mitchell. Emma had few photos of her father in uniform. This one, with him grinning beneath the Arabian sun, felt like a gift. This warthog saved 47 Marines near Kuwait City, Harrison continued. Jack flew through 4 SAM sites to reach them. The core was pinned down, tanks closing in. No other aircraft could operate in that environment. Too much flak, too many missiles, too close to friendly forces. He tapped the glass case. This helmet saved his life that day. Took shrapnel from an exploding SAM. Still completed the mission. Emma studied the photograph, noting the tail number on the aircraft. That's the 297. Harrison nodded. She's had a few rebuilds since then, but same airframe. Jack used to say she was the ugliest angel God ever put in the sky. Emma smiled at that. It sounded like something from the few memories she had of him. The A-10 isn't the most sophisticated aircraft in our inventory, Harrison said. No stealth, no supersonic dash. But it's the absolute best tool when American boys are in trouble on the ground. You understand that in your bones, don't you? She nodded. It's why I chose this platform instead of F-16s or F-35s. Reynolds doesn't get that. He flies a desk better than he ever flew a warthog. Harrison's voice softened. But he's still your commanding officer. Who thinks I belong in logistics? For now, but when the moment comes, and it will, you need to be ready. Harrison moved to another display, this one showing the internal components of the GAU-8A Avenger cannon, the massive gun that defined the A-10. 7 barrels, 70 rounds per second, depleted uranium penetrators that can punch through armor like it's cardboard. His fingers traced the diagram with reverence. But the real art isn't in the hardware. It's knowing exactly where to put those rounds when friendlies are 50 meters from the target. Emma listened as Harrison detailed the intricacies of close air support in mountainous terrain. He spoke of wind currents in narrow valleys, of the crucial differences between eastern and western ridge slopes, of how to judge distance by shadow length in Afghanistan's crystalline air. The kind of knowledge that wasn't in any manual. How do you know all this? She asked. I wrote the unofficial supplement to the combat manual after Desert Storm. The things they don't teach at the academy. He gave her a sidelong glance. I've got a copy if you're interested. I am. Good, because SEAL Team 7 is heading into a bad situation whether Reynolds sees it or not. That night after her logistics shift ended, Emma made her way to the simulator building. The facility housed 4 A-10 simulators used for training and mission rehearsal. At this hour, they sat dark and unoccupied, or should have been. Emma used her access card to enter navigating the darkened corridors until she reached Simulator 3. She discovered weeks ago that this particular unit had a software glitch. If powered down improperly, it would reboot with maintenance permissions rather than standard user access. Those elevated permissions allowed custom mission parameters beyond the approved scenarios. She powered up the system, entered her credentials, and began loading the terrain data for the Korengal Valley. Her fingers moved rapidly across the keyboard, inputting coordinates, adjusting weather conditions, setting time of day. Breaking into government property after hours. Your father did the same thing. Emma startled, spinning to find Harrison standing in the doorway. Jesus, you scared me. Good. Means your situational awareness needs work. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. What scenario are you building? Caught Emma considered lying but opted for truth. Korengal Valley, I'm mapping potential ambush points along the SEAL insertion route. Harrison nodded, unsurprised. Mind some company. Depends. Are you here to report me? I'm here to help you save lives. He settled into the observer's chair beside the simulator. Your father used to run unauthorized sims too. Kuwait 1991. The brass had ordered no flights below 10,000 feet due to the SAM threat. Jack knew that altitude made close air support impossible. So what did he do? Spent every night for a week in the sim practicing terrain-following radar approaches at 50 feet. When the Marines called for help, he was ready. Harrison gestured to the simulator. Show me what you've built. Emma climbed into the cockpit while Harrison watched the external monitor. She initiated the program, and the screens came alive with a detailed recreation of the Korengal Valley. The digital landscape was rendered in perfect detail, down to individual trees and rock formations. This is the planned insertion point, she said, manipulating the view. And these are the ridgelines I'm worried about. Harrison leaned forward, studying the terrain. Good instincts. Those positions dominate the entire valley floor. No cover, no concealment. Exactly my concern. If the mission is compromised, SEAL Team 7 will be trapped in a natural kill box. For the next 3 hours, they ran simulations. Emma flew virtual combat sorties while Harrison critiqued her approach, angles, weapon selection, and evasive maneuvers. They explored different scenarios, daylight, darkness, varying weather conditions. They plotted defensive positions for ground forces and identified escape routes. You're fighting the aircraft, Harrison observed after one particularly difficult run. The A-10 isn't nimble, but she's stable. Stop trying to make her dance. Let her do what she was built for. He showed her an unconventional technique, what crop dusters called wire running, flying so low and precise that the aircraft seemed to trace invisible lines across the landscape. In the valley, your greatest threat isn't SAMs. It's small arms fire from elevation. Stay low. Use the terrain for masking and make your gun runs precise. Short bursts, half-second taps. Let dust be your smokescreen, not your blindfold. Emma absorbed everything, making mental notes, adjusting her technique with each simulated run. On the 47th iteration, she achieved a perfect score. All targets neutralized, no friendly casualties, minimal ammunition expenditure. Well done, Harrison said as the simulation ended. But remember, the real thing is always harder. More confusion, more fear, more variables. Emma removed her helmet, fatigue etching lines around her eyes. I've identified a serious problem with the SEAL mission plan. They're moving into a trap. Yes, they are. So what do I do? Reynolds already shut me down once. Harrison considered the question carefully. Go through channels first. Try again with Reynolds. If that fails, find someone in the SEAL team. Warn them directly. That would be going around my chain of command. Sometimes chains need breaking when lives are at stake. Harrison stood, stretching his back. Your father made enemies by speaking truth to power, but he saved lives. The choice is always yours, Captain. The use of her rank wasn't accidental, a reminder of both her responsibility and her oath. Thank you, sir, Emma said, shutting down the simulator. For everything. Don't thank me yet, Harrison replied, his voice somber. The hard part's still coming. Bob. Dawn painted the Hindu Kush Mountains in shades of gold and shadow as Emma entered the operations center. The room buzzed with activity, intelligence officers updating threat assessments, communications, specialists checking equipment, mission planners, finalizing details. Major Reynolds stood at the central table reviewing the operational timeline with his senior staff. Emma approached, standing at a respectful distance until he acknowledged her. Captain Mitchell, logistics report. All aircraft fueled and armed according to mission parameters, sir. But I need to speak with you about the operational plan. Reynolds' expression hardened. We covered this yesterday, Captain. Sir, I've completed additional analysis of the terrain and probable enemy positions. The current insertion route places SEAL Team 7 at extreme risk. She unfolded a map on the table indicating specific coordinates. These ridge positions provide interlocking fields of fire covering the entire approach. If the enemy has advanced knowledge of the operation, they could establish a near-perfect ambush. Reynolds glanced at the map, then at the officers around the table. Captain Mitchell seems to believe our intelligence is flawed, that the combined expertise of SOCOM planners has overlooked something obvious. The rebuke was public and pointed. Several officers looked away, uncomfortable with the tension. Sir, I'm not questioning the intelligence, Emma persisted. I'm highlighting a tactical vulnerability based on terrain analysis. Noted, Captain. Reynolds gathered the map, folding it with deliberate precision. Your concerns will be added to the operational record. Is there anything else? The dismissal was clear. Emma straightened, her voice cooling. No, sir. As she turned to leave, Sergeant Riley Jenkins, an intelligence specialist, caught her eye. The young sergeant had been watching the exchange with interest. He gave her an almost imperceptible nod as she passed. In the corridor outside, Jenkins fell into step beside her. Captain Mitchell. Sergeant? Jenkins glanced around to ensure they were alone. For what it's worth, I think you're right. Emma stopped walking. You do? Yes, ma'am. I've been monitoring chatter in the region. There's been an uptick in encrypted communications around Korengal. Nothing definitive, but enough to raise flags. Have you reported this? 3 times. It's been assessed as ambient activity related to opium shipments. Jenkins shrugged. Maybe it is, but combined with your terrain analysis, we need to warn the SEAL team directly, Emma said. Jenkins hesitated. That's a career-limiting move, ma'am. So is attending 81 funerals. The sergeant considered this, then nodded. Lieutenant Carter is leading the operation. He's at the pre-deployment briefing in Hangar 4. Thank you, Sergeant. I was never here, Captain. Jenkins walked away, leaving Emma alone with her decision. Hangar 4 hummed with the controlled chaos of special operators preparing for combat. SEAL Team 7 and their support elements conducted final equipment checks, reviewed communications protocols, and studied mission objectives. Weapons were cleaned, communications, gear tested, medical supplies inventoried. Lieutenant Marcus Razor Carter stood apart, studying a 3-dimensional terrain model of the objective area. At 35, Carter had the weathered look of a man who had seen too much sun and too little peace. His frame was solid rather than bulky, his movements efficient and precise. Emma approached, aware of curious glances from the SEALs. Female officers rarely entered their pre-mission space. Lieutenant Carter, Captain Emma Mitchell, 455th Air Expeditionary Wing. Carter looked up, his expression neutral. Captain, what can I do for you? I'd like to discuss your insertion route if you have a moment. My insertion route, he repeated, his tone suggesting he found the request unusual. You're with the A-10 squadron. Yes. And you're concerned about our ground movement. Emma met his gaze directly. I am. Carter studied her for a moment, then nodded toward a secluded corner of the hangar. 5 minutes. They moved away from the main group, stopping beside a stack of equipment crates. Carter turned to face her, arms crossed. I've been to the Korengal 6 times, Captain. How long have you been flying the A-10? 3 years, but this isn't about my experience level. It feels like it might be. His tone wasn't hostile, merely factual. Emma unfolded the map she'd brought. Your planned approach takes you through this valley. It funnels directly between these 2 ridgelines, both of which offer perfect overwatch positions. Carter glanced at the map. We're aware of the terrain challenges. That's why we're moving at night with nods. Night won't matter if they're expecting you. Emma pointed to specific locations. These positions allow interlocking fields of fire. If they have heavy weapons in place, there's no cover available for 300 meters in any direction. Carter's expression shifted slightly, professional interest overcoming his initial skepticism. Intelligence doesn't indicate any unusual activity in the area. Intelligence is missing something. Sergeant Jenkins has tracked increased encrypted communications in the region. Jenkins, Carter's eyebrows rose. He's good, one of the best analysts we have. He's concerned, so am I. Carter studied the map more carefully now. What's your stake in this, Captain? Most pilots don't involve themselves in ground planning. Emma hesitated, then decided on honesty. My father was an A-10 pilot. He specialized in close air support for special operations. He taught me that the best mission is one where air support isn't needed because the planning was solid. Your father, Carter said slowly. What was his name? Jack Mitchell. Carter's head snapped up, recognition flashing in his eyes. Thunderbolt Jack Desert Storm. The nickname startled her. You knew him? Of him. My uncle was with 1st Marines in Kuwait. Your father saved their unit during the highway assault. Carter's demeanor changed completely. Why didn't you lead with that? Because I wanted you to evaluate my concerns on their merits, not my lineage. A faint smile touched Carter's lips. Fair enough. He returned his attention to the map. What alternative are you suggesting? Emma indicated a different approach. This route is longer but provides more cover. It avoids the natural channelization and gives you multiple exfil options if things go wrong. Carter considered the proposal. It adds 3 hours to our movement. 3 hours against potential catastrophe. The SEAL commander was quiet for a long moment. I'll review this with my team. No promises, but we'll consider the alternative. That's all I ask. Carter refolded the map, handing it back to her. Your father saved my uncle's unit. Now his daughter might be saving mine. He extended his hand. Thank you, Captain Mitchell. Emma shook his hand, relieved that at least someone was listening. Good hunting, Lieutenant. Let's hope the hunting doesn't turn into being hunted. The afternoon sun baked the flight line as Emma completed her logistics duties. She'd overseen the arming of 4 A-10s for the SEAL support mission, ensuring each aircraft carried the prescribed weapon load, AGM-65 Maverick missiles, 500-pound GBU-12 laser-guided bombs, and full drums of 30mm ammunition for the Avenger cannon. As she verified the final aircraft, she found herself beside the 297, the same airframe her father had flown in Desert Storm. Though not assigned to the mission, it sat fully fueled, its weapon systems online and ready. She's a beautiful aircraft. Emma turned to find Harrison approaching, his eyes on the A-10. Not the word most people use to describe the warthog, she replied. Most people lack imagination. Harrison ran a hand along the aircraft's armored fuselage. Did you speak with Reynolds? Yes, and with Lieutenant Carter directly. Harrison's eyebrows rose. Bold move. How did Carter take it? Better than Reynolds. He knew my father's reputation. That helped, I'm sure. Jack cast a long shadow. Harrison looked toward the mountains where darkness would soon fall. Did Carter agree to alter the plan? He said he'd review it with his team. Harrison nodded, his expression revealing nothing. Then you've done what you can through proper channels. Emma sensed an unspoken but hanging in the air. You think it won't be enough? I think men like Carter have their own chains of command, their own pressures. Harrison turned to face her directly. Which is why I've taken the liberty of preparing the 297. Emma stiffened. What do you mean preparing? Full combat load, extra ammunition, countermeasures topped off. He held up a hand to forestall her objection. Just precautionary. The aircraft needed routine maintenance anyway. Colonel Harrison. Bill, he corrected. This is highly irregular. So is writing condolence letters to 81 families when it could have been prevented. Harrison's voice dropped to a near whisper. I'm not suggesting anything, Captain. I'm merely ensuring all assets are ready if needed. Emma understood the dangerous territory they were entering. The mission brief doesn't include A-10 support below 10,000 feet. F-16s are providing high-altitude coverage only. Mission parameters change in the field all the time. Harrison held her gaze. Your father taught me that sometimes a pilot has to make a decision in the moment. When lives hang in the balance, rulebooks become very thin reading. Before Emma could respond, her radio crackled. Captain Mitchell, report to operations immediately. Captain Mitchell to operations. She exchanged a look with Harrison. I have to go. Of course. He stepped back from the aircraft. Remember what I said about being ready when the moment comes. There. In the operations center, controlled chaos had replaced the normal routine. Officers moved with urgency. Communications specialists monitored radio traffic with intense focus. And at the center of it all, Major Reynolds stood grim-faced before a large tactical display. Emma reported as ordered, noting the tension in the room. Captain Mitchell reporting, sir. Reynolds acknowledged her with a curt nod. Mitchell, you're familiar with the SEAL mission in Korengal? Yes, sir. They're conducting a capture operation against a high-value target. The mission timeline has been accelerated. Intelligence indicates the target is moving tonight rather than tomorrow. SEAL Team 7 deployed 30 minutes ago. Emma felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. They're moving in daylight. Affirmative. Changes to the operational timeline required immediate execution. The implications were clear. The SEALs would be approaching their objective with several hours of daylight remaining, making them far more vulnerable to observation. Exactly the scenario she had warned against. Sir, my earlier concerns about the terrain have been noted, Captain. Reynolds cut her off. Lieutenant Carter was briefed on all potential hazards. He made the operational decision to proceed. Emma fell silent, recognizing the futility of further argument. The mission was underway. The die was cast. I want you monitoring communications, Reynolds continued. Your familiarity with the terrain may prove useful if the situation evolves. Yes, sir. Emma took her position at the communications station, donning a headset. The channel was currently silent, the SEALs maintaining radio discipline during their approach. On the tactical display, small blue icons represented the team's last known position, moving slowly through the rugged terrain toward the objective. Hours passed. The operations center maintained its vigil as daylight began to fade over the Hindu Kush. Periodic status updates from SEAL Team 7 reported normal progress, no enemy contact, estimated arrival at the objective after nightfall. Then at 14:05 hours, everything changed. The radio erupted with controlled urgency. Base Trident actual. Contact, contact, contact. Heavy enemy fire, multiple positions. We are compromised. Request immediate air support. Reynolds leaned over the communications officer. Trident actual, this is base. Sit rep. Carter's voice came through the sound of gunfire in the background. Ambush! 3 ridge lines, heavy weapons, taking casualties. We are in the open with minimal cover. Emma closed her eyes briefly, exactly as she had feared. Reynolds turned to the air operations officer. Status of air assets. F-16s are 20 minutes out, sir. They were refueling when the call came in. Unacceptable. Reynolds pointed to the tactical display. SEAL Team 7 is in immediate danger. I need air support now. The QRF Apache gunships could be there in 15 minutes, another officer suggested. Get them airborne, Reynolds ordered. He turned back to the communications. Trident actual air support inbound, 15 minutes. Carter's reply was terse. We don't have 15 minutes. Enemy has high ground with crew-served weapons. Multiple SAM signatures detected, requesting immediate danger close support. Emma stood unable to remain silent. Sir, the A-10s are ready. I can be there in 12 minutes. Reynolds barely glanced at her. Negative, Captain. Protocols require experienced pilots for danger close operations. With respect, sir, I've run this exact scenario 47 times in simulation. I know the terrain better than anyone. Simulation isn't combat, Mitchell. The radio crackled again. Carter's voice was controlled but urgent. Base be advised. We have 8 wounded. Ammunition at 60% and falling. Cannot maintain position for 15 minutes. Emma stepped closer to Reynolds, lowering her voice. Sir, 81 Americans are about to die while we debate protocols. Reynolds faced her, his expression hard. Stand down, Captain. That's an order. Before she could respond, a new voice entered the conversation. Major Reynolds. Colonel Harrison approached, his manner deliberately casual despite the crisis unfolding. A word, if I may. Reynolds hesitated, then nodded, moving slightly apart from the others. Harrison spoke quietly but intensely, gesturing occasionally toward the tactical display. Emma couldn't hear the conversation, but she could see Reynolds' expression shifting from irritation to reluctant consideration. Meanwhile, the situation in the Korengal deteriorated rapidly. Base enemy closing from North Ridge, distance 200 meters and closing. SAM launch detected, medevac impossible under current conditions. Emma made her decision. While Reynolds remained engaged with Harrison, she moved quietly toward the exit. No one stopped her, all attention focused on the crisis unfolding on the tactical display. In the corridor outside, Emma broke into a run. Her mind calculated distances, fuel requirements, weapons loads. The 297 was ready. She could be airborne in under 10 minutes. 12 minutes to the valley. That left approximately 5 minutes before SEAL Team 7 would be overrun. It would be close, too close. She reached her quarters in record time, snatched a pen and paper, and scrawled a brief note. If you're reading this, I acted because 81 Americans were dying while paperwork argued with itself. Tell my mother I love her. She placed the note on her desk, then hurried to the flight line. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the tarmac as she approached the 297. The crew chief, surprised to see her, started to speak. Captain, I wasn't informed. Emergency scramble. Emma cut him off, her tone brooking no argument. SEAL Team 7 is under heavy fire. The crew chief hesitated only briefly before nodding. Aircraft is ready, ma'am. Full combat load. Emma climbed into the cockpit, her hands moving through the pre-flight checklist with practice efficiency. Engine start, systems check, weapons armed. Each step performed with mechanical precision, while part of her mind remained focused on the men fighting for their lives in a distant valley. As the massive turbofan spooled up, Emma switched her radio to the command frequency. Tower Thunderbolt 3 requesting emergency takeoff. SEAL Team 7 is under fire and requires immediate close air support. The tower controller sounded confused. Thunderbolt 3, I show no flight plan filed. Please confirm authorization. Emma made her choice. Authorization 81 Americans about to die, I'm rolling. She advanced the throttles, the A-10 lurching forward with gathering momentum. Through the canopy, she could see figures running toward the aircraft, likely security forces responding to the unauthorized takeoff. Too late. The A-10 gathered speed, lifted off, and climbed into the afternoon sky. Emma banked toward the mountains, setting course for the Korengal Valley. Once clear of the base, she switched to the emergency frequency. Any station, any station. Thunderbolt 3 departing Bagram, inbound Korengal Valley. SEAL Team 7 under heavy fire. ETA 12 minutes. After a moment of silence, a voice responded, not from base, but from the battlefield. Thunderbolt 3, this is Trident Actual. Carter's voice carried equal measures of surprise and desperate hope. We are surrounded on 3 sides, heavy weapons on ridge lines. SAM threat confirmed. Do you have danger? Close authorization. Emma pushed the throttles to maximum, the rugged mountains rushing beneath her. I'm authorized to save Americans, Lieutenant. Mark your positions with IR strobes. I'll be on your shoulder in 11 minutes now. Behind her, the radio exploded with orders from base command. Major Reynolds' voice cut through the chatter, angry and authoritative. Mitchell returned to base immediately. You are not cleared for this operation. This is a direct order. Emma reached down and switched off the command frequency, leaving only the direct line to the embattled SEALs open. The die was cast. There was no turning back. Ahead, the Korengal Valley came into view, a deep gash in the earth surrounded by towering peaks. Somewhere in that natural fortress, 81 Americans fought for their lives, and she was their only hope. The A-10 thundered toward the battlefield, a steel angel with vengeance in its heart. The Korengal Valley opened beneath Emma like the maw of some ancient predator. Jagged ridges formed teeth of stone against the darkening sky while shadows pooled in the depths where American blood was being spilled. Through her canopy, she could see flashes of gunfire, bright pinpricks against the gathering dusk. 81 men, surrounded, ammunition failing, time running out. Emma's hands moved with fluid precision across the controls, the weight of her decision pressing against her chest like armor. She had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. If she survived, there would be consequences. If she failed, the consequences would be measured in flag-draped coffins. She pushed the thought away, focusing on the mission parameters. The A-10's heads-up display projected tactical information across her field of vision. Altitude, airspeed, weapon status, enemy positions gleaned from preliminary intelligence. Thunderbolt 3 Trident Actual. Carter's voice crackled through her headset, steady despite the chaos surrounding him. Be advised, we have confirmed SAM sites on both the eastern and southern ridges. Approach from the north is recommended. Copy Trident. Conducting initial assessment. Emma banked the aircraft in a wide arc around the valley's perimeter, staying high enough to avoid small arms fire while she surveyed the battlefield. The tactical situation was worse than she had feared. The SEAL team and their support elements were pinned in a natural depression near the valley floor, surrounded on 3 sides by elevated enemy positions. Muzzle flashes sparkled along the ridgelines like malevolent stars, while the distinctive smoke trails of rocket-propelled grenades arced toward American positions. I count 3 primary heavy weapons emplacements, Emma reported. Eastern Ridge, Southern Spur, and Western High Ground, plus multiple SAM launch sites. Confirmed, Carter replied. We've lost access to our northern escape route. Enemy has established interlocking fields of fire. Exactly where you predicted. Emma absorbed this with grim satisfaction that brought no joy. Being right meant nothing if these men died anyway. Marking our positions with IR strobes now, Carter continued. Be advised, enemy is within 50 meters of friendly forces in some sectors. 50 meters. Standard air support protocols prohibited engagement within 100 meters of friendly positions. This would be danger close in its purest form. Understood, Trident. I'm commencing my attack run. Emma brought the aircraft around, lining up for her first pass. I'll work the eastern ridge first to break their crossfire. She dropped the A-10 like a stone, the aircraft's nose tipping toward the earth as she descended into the killing zone. At 5,000 feet, the valley spread before her in terrible clarity. At 3,000 feet, she could distinguish individual fighters moving along the ridgelines. At 500 feet, the first tracers from enemy anti-aircraft guns reached up to greet her. Emma did not flinch. She had expected this, had trained for it, had run this exact scenario 47 times in simulation. But Harrison had been right. Reality was different. The buffeting of actual flak against the airframe, the scream of warning sensors as enemy targeting systems locked onto her, the knowledge that real lives hung on her every decision. Yet beneath the fear and tension lay a strange calm, as if her father's spirit guided her hands. At 1,000 feet, she lined up the eastern ridge in her sights. The GAU-8 Avenger cannon dominated the A-10's design, with the cockpit offset to accommodate its massive bulk. 7 barrels capable of delivering 70 rounds per second. Depleted uranium penetrators that could shred armor stone flesh. "Eastern Ridge first to pass," she announced. "Guns hot." Emma pressed the trigger for a precisely calculated 2-second burst. The A-10 shuddered as the cannon roared to life, its distinctive sound like the tearing of cosmic fabric. Brrrt! Through the canopy, she watched 30-millimeter rounds walk across the ridgeline, obliterating a machine gun nest in a bloom of dust and fire. She pulled up sharply, banking hard to avoid presenting a predictable target to the SAM sights. Warning indicators screamed as enemy targeting systems tried to lock onto her, but the A-10's electronic countermeasures, coupled with her evasive maneuvers, kept the missiles confused. "Good effect on Eastern Ridge," Carter confirmed. "You just silenced their heavy machine gun. Moving Team 3 to better cover." Emma circled for her second attack run, already calculating angles and threats. The Southern Ridge housed another heavy weapons team, this one dangerously close to the SEAL position. "Southern Ridge second pass. This will be danger close, 50 meters from your position." "Understood, Thunderbolt." Were buttoned up tight. She rolled in again, dropping even lower this time, using the terrain to mask her approach until the last possible moment. The enemy position came into view, fighters scrambling as they heard the A-10's approach. Too late. Emma laid down a half-second burst with surgical precision, the depleted uranium rounds tearing through rock and flesh with equal indifference. As she pulled away, tracers followed her ascent, one round pinging off the armored cockpit, with a sound like a hammer striking an anvil. The aircraft's systems reported minor damage, but nothing critical. "Direct hit on southern position," Carter reported. "Hostiles neutralized, and your rounds impacted 45 meters from our lines. Negative friendly casualties." Emma allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. This was what the A-10 was built for. Close air support when nothing else would do. A flying tank designed to endure punishment while delivering precision death. "Western high ground next," she called. "Then I'll hunt those SAM sites." "Copy. Be advised we have an enemy assault element always trying to move on our western flank. 70 meters and closing." Emma banked hard, bringing the A-10 around for another run. "I see them. Stand by." The Western Ridge presented a new challenge. The enemy fighters were using a boulder field for cover, making them difficult targets. Emma adjusted her approach, coming in lower and slower than conventional wisdom dictated. Dangerous but necessary. She lined up the shot, waiting until the boulder field filled her sights, then pressed the trigger in a precise half-second tap. The cannon's roar seemed to shake the very mountains as rounds stitched a deadly pattern through the rocks. Enemy fighters scattered like ants from a broken hill, some falling, others retreating. "Western Ridge suppressed," she reported, pulling away as tracer fire pursued her, moving to eliminate SAM threats. But the radio had other ideas. Mitchell, respond immediately." Major Reynolds' voice cut through the combat channel, overriding the frequency she had silenced earlier. "Return to base now. That is a direct order." Emma hesitated, her hand hovering over the radio controls. She could shut him out again, but that would only compound her insubordination. "Sir, with respect, SEAL Team 7 is surrounded and taking heavy casualties. I am their only available air support." "This is not your call to make," Captain Sewich Reynolds' voice was tight with anger. "You have violated direct orders, endangered a multi-million-dollar aircraft, and compromised operational security." Emma watched tracer fire arc upward from the valley as she circled, keeping the enemy heads down. Time was critical. Every second spent arguing was a second closer to American deaths. "Sir, I have positive identification of all targets. I am engaging with precision fire. 0 friendly casualties reported." She kept her voice clinical, professional. Request permission to continue supporting SEAL Team 7 until additional assets arrive. The radio fell silent for several seconds. When Reynolds spoke again, his tone had changed. Stand by, Thunderbolt 3. In the Bagram Operations Center, chaos reigned. Officers shouted over one another as the unauthorized mission unfolded on their monitors. Intelligence analysts scrambled to provide real-time updates, while communications specialists attempted to coordinate with higher command. Major Reynolds stood at the center of the storm, his face flushed with anger and something else, something he would never admit aloud: fear. Not for his career, though, that was certainly in jeopardy, but for the young pilot he had sent into a combat situation she was not cleared for. Colonel Harrison approached, his weathered face grim. She's doing exactly what she trained to do, James. And she's doing it well. Reynolds glared at the older man. She directly disobeyed orders, stolen aircraft, initiated unauthorized combat operations, and saved American lives in the process. Harrison gestured toward the tactical display, where blue icons representing SEAL Team 7 were now showing movement. Look at the feed. They were pinned down, being slaughtered. Now they're maneuvering. Another officer interrupted. Sir, F-16s are still 20 minutes out. Apache gunships report they cannot approach due to the SAM threat, which Mitchell is systematically eliminating, Harrison added pointedly. Reynolds studied the tactical display. The A-10's icons circled the battlefield like a predator, each pass resulting in fewer enemy positions. The blue icons of SEAL Team 7 were indeed moving, establishing a more defensible perimeter. Sir, a communications officer called out. We have a priority transmission from SEAL Command. Reynolds moved to the console, accepting the handset. This is Major Reynolds. The voice on the other end was crisp, authoritative. Major, this is Admiral Hollister. I'm looking at real-time feeds from Korengal, who authorized the A-10 support. Reynolds hesitated, glancing at Harrison. The older pilot nodded slightly. Sir, Captain Emma Mitchell identified a critical threat to SEAL Team 7 and took independent action when conventional support was unavailable. Without authorization. Yes, sir, against my direct orders. There was a pause on the line. And the results? Reynolds swallowed his pride. Extremely effective, sir. She's neutralized multiple heavy weapons positions and is currently targeting SAM sites to clear the way for medevac. Another pause. I see. The Admiral's voice betrayed no emotion. Keep that pilot on station, Major. Whatever else happens, those SEALs come home first. We'll sort out the rest later. Yes, sir. Reynolds placed the handset down, turning to find Harrison watching him. That was the right call, James. It wasn't my call to make, Reynolds replied. Just like it wasn't Mitchell's. When the rulebook fails, someone has to write a new page. Harrison nodded toward the display. Right now, she's writing it in 30mm tungsten. Reynolds moved to the communications station. Patch me through to Thunderbolt 3. The radio crackled as the connection was established. Thunderbolt 3, this is base. You are cleared to continue support operations for SEAL Team 7. Priority is neutralizing SAM threats to enable medevac. All available assets are being diverted to your location. Emma's voice came back professionally detached. Copy base, proceeding with SAM suppression. As Reynolds stepped away from the console, he noticed a figure standing at the operations center entrance. Air Force Inspector General Hayes, a silver-haired man with a reputation for by-the-book discipline. The man who had been sent to evaluate Reynolds' command just days earlier. Their eyes met across the room. Hayes' expression was unreadable. Reynolds had the distinct feeling that his career had just reached a defining crossroads. Emma banked the A-10 hard, bringing it around for another attack run. The southern SAM site was her primary target now, a mobile launcher nestled in a rocky outcropping halfway up the ridge. Trident Actual, I'm engaging the southern SAM with Maverick. Copy Thunderbolt. We've got visual on the target. Emma armed one of the AGM-65 Maverick missiles mounted under the A-10's wings. The weapon's infrared seeker head locked onto the heat signature of the SAM launcher. Missile away. The Maverick dropped from its hardpoint motor, igniting as it accelerated toward the target. 4 seconds later, the SAM position disappeared in a blossoming fireball that echoed through the valley. Direct hit, Carter confirmed. Southern SAM site destroyed. 1 down, 1 to go. Emma banked toward the eastern ridge where the second SAM launcher lurked. This one would be trickier. The launcher was partially concealed beneath a rocky overhang, making a direct approach difficult. She would need to use the terrain. Emma dropped the A-10 to a dangerously low altitude following the contours of the valley floor. The aircraft's engines howled as she pushed them to maximum power, skimming just 200 feet above the ground. Warning indicators flashed as the proximity sensors detected the closeness of the terrain. Thunderbolt 3, you're flying extremely low, Carter observed, tension evident in his voice. Terrain masking, Emma replied calmly, using the ridge to block their radar until the last second. It was a tactic Harrison had described from Desert Storm, one her father had pioneered. Hug the terrain, use the earth itself as a shield, then pop up at the last possible moment for the kill shot. Emma followed the valley's curve, counting down in her head. 3, 2, 1. She pulled back on the stick sharply, the A-10 responding with a steep climb that crested the ridge precisely where she intended. The SAM sight appeared directly in her sights, the crew scrambling as they realized their radar had been blind to her approach. This time, Emma didn't use a missile. The angle was perfect for guns. The Avenger cannon roared once more, a 1-second burst that transformed the SAM launcher and its crew into twisted metal and scattered remains. Eastern SAM eliminated, she reported, banking away as small arms fire pursued her. Confirmed, Carter replied. Both SAM sites neutralized. Well done, Thunderbolt. Emma allowed herself a brief smile. The immediate anti-air threat was gone. Now she could focus on supporting the SEAL team's movement. What's your status, Trident? 8 wounded, 3 critical. Ammunition at 40%. We need to establish a defensible position until medevac arrives. Emma studied the terrain through her canopy. The natural bowl where the SEALs were pinned offered little protection. They needed high ground or at least better cover. There's a ravine to your west, she observed, about 200 meters from your current position. It offers cover from the northern and eastern firing positions. We see it, Carter confirmed, but there's open ground between us and there. We'd be fully exposed during movement. I'll cover you, Emma said without hesitation. Suppressive fire on all 3 ridge lines. When I give the word, move your teams in sequence. Copy that. There was a pause. Ready when you are. Emma circled once more, plotting her attack run with mathematical precision. This would require timing and coordination beyond anything she had attempted in simulation. One mistake, one misjudgment, and Americans would die. She steadied herself, drawing a deep breath. The fear was still there, but beneath it lay that same strange calm, as if the aircraft itself knew what to do, guided by the ghosts of pilots past. Beginning suppression runs. Stand by to move on my mark. Emma brought the A-10 in fast and low, targeting the northern ridge first. The cannon tore through enemy positions, silencing a machine gun nest and sending fighters scrambling for cover. Without pausing, she banked hard and swept the eastern ridge with another burst, walking the rounds along the entire firing line. Western ridge final suppression, she called, rolling into her 3rd consecutive attack run. The cannon roared again, 30mm rounds shattering rock and flesh with equal ease. All ridges suppressed, Emma announced, pulling up sharply. Move now. Trident first team go. Through her canopy, she could see movement below. A group of SEALs breaking cover, carrying a wounded comrade as they sprinted across the open ground toward the ravine. First team moving, Carter confirmed. Second team preparing. Emma continued to circle the A-10's cannon ready as she watched for any enemy movement. A fighter appeared on the northern ridge shouldering an RPG. She didn't hesitate, didn't even need to think. The cannon spoke once more, a brief quarter-second burst that erased the threat. Second team go now. More movement below as another group of SEALs made their dash to safety. Emma kept her eyes scanning the ridgelines, the A-10 turning in a tight circle above the battlefield. Enemy movement, southern high ground, she warned, spotting figures repositioning. The cannon thundered again, suppressing the threat before it could materialize. Second team clear, Carter reported. Final team with wounded, preparing to move. This would be the most vulnerable group, burdened with the critically injured. Emma knew she needed to create a more substantial distraction. Trident, I'm going to drop a GBU-12 on the northern ridge as you move. The blast will provide cover and confusion. Copy that. Ready when you are. Emma armed one of the 500-pound laser-guided bombs mounted under the A-10's wing. The targeting system linked with the aircraft's infrared designator, allowing her to precisely place the weapon. Northern ridge targeted. Bomb away. The GBU-12 fell from its hardpoint, guiding itself toward the designated coordinates. 3 seconds later, the northern ridge erupted in a massive explosion. Rock and debris thrown skyward as the shockwave rolled through the valley. Move now. Final team go. Through swirling dust and smoke, the last group of SEALs broke cover, carrying stretchers with their wounded. Emma kept the A-10 circling overhead cannon at the ready, but the bomb's devastation had temporarily silenced all enemy activity. Final team at the ravine, Carter reported moments later. All units clear of the kill zone. Emma exhaled slowly, tension draining from her shoulders. The immediate crisis was averted. The SEAL team had reached a defensible position. Now came the next challenge. Base Thunderbolt 3. SEAL Team 7 has reached cover at these coordinates. SAM threat neutralized. Request immediate medevac for wounded. The response was immediate. Copy Thunderbolt 3. Medevac inbound. ETA 15 minutes. F-16s will be on station in 12 to provide additional support. Emma checked her fuel and ammunition status. The combat had been intense but brief. She had expended one Maverick missile, one GBU-12 bomb, and approximately 30% of her cannon ammunition. Fuel remained sufficient for another 40 minutes on station. Trident actual medevac is 15 minutes out. What's your status? Consolidating position, Carter replied. Better cover here, but we're still taking sporadic fire from the high ground. Enemy appears to be regrouping. Emma scanned the ridge lines. With the heavy weapons and SAM sites eliminated, the remaining threat came from infantry, with small arms and possibly RPGs. Dangerous but manageable. I'll keep them suppressed until reinforcements arrive. She settled the A-10 into a patrol pattern, making regular passes over the enemy positions, firing short bursts from the cannon whenever activity was spotted. The psychological effect was as important as the physical. The distinctive sound of the A-10's gun was enough to keep many fighters in cover. As she completed her third patrol circuit, Emma noticed a disturbing change in the aircraft's handling. A slight sluggishness in the controls, a subtle vibration that hadn't been present before. She scanned her instruments. Nothing immediately alarming, but something wasn't right. She adjusted her flight path, testing the aircraft's response. There, a definite lag in the right aileron. And now that she was looking for it, a warning light she had missed in the heat of combat. The A-10 had taken damage likely during one of her low passes. Emma toggled the internal damage assessment system. The report was concerning but not catastrophic. Hydraulic pressure dropping in the secondary flight control system. Some structural damage to the right wing. Nothing that would bring down an A-10 immediately. The aircraft was designed to fly with substantial damage, but not something to ignore either. She had a decision to make. The prudent choice would be to return to base immediately. The critical SAM threats were eliminated. The SEAL team had reached defensive terrain. Other aircraft were inbound. But prudent had never saved lives in the Korangal. Base Thunderbolt 3. Be advised I've sustained some damage to hydraulics and right-wing structure. Systems functioning within operational parameters. Remaining on station until medevac is complete. There was a pause before the reply came. Not Reynolds this time, but Harrison's voice. Thunderbolt 3 understood. Damage assessment. Manageable, sir. The Warthog's built for this. Another pause. Your father would say the same thing. Harrison's voice carried a mixture of pride and concern. Maintain station, but no unnecessary risks. That's an order, Captain. Copy that, sir. Emma continued her patrol, compensating for the damaged controls. The A-10 felt heavier now, less responsive, but still deadly effective. Blood had begun to seep through her flight suit sleeve. She realized belatedly that she must have been hit by fragments when the cockpit was struck earlier. The wound didn't seem serious, a minor inconvenience compared to what the men below were enduring. Thunderbolt 3 Trident actual. Enemy massing for another push from the north. At least 30 fighters moving into position. Emma banked toward the northern ridge, ignoring the protest from her damaged hydraulics. I see them. Stand by. The enemy force was indeed substantial, taking advantage of the fading light to assemble for an assault. They had learned from their earlier mistakes, staying dispersed and using terrain features for cover. Emma considered her options. A bomb would be effective, but might alert them to take better cover. The cannon would be more precise, but would require multiple passes to target such a dispersed force. She opted for a combination approach. Trident, I'm going to drop a GBU-12 on their assembly area, then follow immediately with guns. Keep your heads down. Copy that. We're buttoned up tight. Emma lined up her approach, designating the target zone with her infrared laser. The GBU-12 fell away from the aircraft, its guidance system locked on the laser spot. The bomb struck with devastating accuracy, the explosion sending a shockwave through the gathering fighters. Bodies and equipment flew skyward as rock fragments scythed through their ranks. Without hesitation, Emma rolled the A-10 into a steep dive, bringing the cannon to bear on the survivors. The gun roared once more, walking its deadly pattern through the chaos. Fighter after fighter fell, others scattering in panic. Direct hit, Carter reported. Enemy assault broken. They're withdrawing to the north. Emma pulled up the damaged wing, groaning under the strain. Warning indicators flashed more insistently now. The hydraulic pressure was dropping faster. Base Thunderbolt 3. Damage assessment deteriorating. Hydraulic system showing increased pressure loss. Harrison's voice came back immediately. Return to base, Captain. F-16s are 8 minutes out. They can cover until medevac arrives. Emma checked her tactical display. The SEAL position was secure for the moment, but the enemy was still present in force. The medevac helicopters would be vulnerable during their approach and extraction. Negative base, remaining on station until medevac is complete. She paused, then added, Sir. She could almost hear Harrison's resigned sigh. Understood, Thunderbolt 3. But if that hydraulic system fails completely, you punch out. That's non-negotiable. Copy that. Emma adjusted her flight pattern to put less strain on the damaged systems. The A-10 could fly with substantial damage, one of its primary design features. But she needed to be judicious now. No unnecessary maneuvers. Conserve energy and hydraulic pressure for when it mattered most. Thunderbolt 3 Trident actual. Medevac inbound from the south. ETA 5 minutes. Copy Trident. I'll provide cover for the extraction. Emma turned the A-10 toward the southern approach corridor. The medevac helicopters would be most vulnerable during their landing and takeoff. She needed to ensure those moments were as secure as possible. Base request illumination rounds over the northern ridge. Keep enemy heads down during extraction. Copy Thunderbolt 3. Illumination inbound from Artillery Firebase Juliet. Minutes later, bright flares blossomed over the northern ridge, bathing the landscape in harsh white light. Any enemy fighters attempting to move would be clearly visible against the illuminated terrain. Medevac on final approach, Carter reported. 2 birds coming in staggered. Emma watched as the first helicopter descended toward the ravine rotors, kicking up clouds of dust. She kept the A-10 circling, protectively scanner sweeping for any threats. Enemy movement western high ground. She called, spotting figures attempting to maneuver for a shot at the vulnerable helicopter. The cannon spoke once more, a short burst that sent them scrambling for cover. First medevac touching down, loading wounded now. Emma continued her protective circle, the A-10's cannon discouraging any further enemy movement. Despite the growing pain in her arm and the increasingly sluggish response from the aircraft controls, she felt a fierce satisfaction. This was what the Warthog was built for. What she was built for. First medevac lifting off, second bird on approach. The first helicopter rose from the ravine heavy with its cargo of wounded Americans. Emma stayed between it and the nearest enemy positions until it was safely away, then turned her attention to covering the second helicopter's approach. Movement northern ridgeline, she warned, spotting fighters attempting to exploit the distraction of the first extraction. Multiple RPG teams. This required immediate action. Emma banked the A-10 toward the threat, ignoring the shrieking protest from her hydraulic warning system. The cannon roared once more, rounds walking precisely along the ridgeline. The enemy fighters disappeared in explosions of dust and stone. Northern ridge suppressed, second medevac clear to land. The second helicopter descended into the ravine, touching down amid swirling clouds of dust. Emma maintained her protective circle, the A-10's cannon ready to answer any threat. Loading final wounded, 60 seconds to liftoff. Those 60 seconds stretched into eternity as Emma scanned for threats. The illumination flares were beginning to fade, shadows lengthening across the battlefield. Perfect conditions for one final desperate enemy attack. It came from where she least expected, Armand. The eastern ridge, which had been quiet for several minutes, suddenly erupted with muzzle flashes, not aimed at the SEAL position but at her. Tracers streaked past the A-10's canopy as Emma reacted instinctively, banking hard away from the threat. The aircraft responded sluggishly, the damaged hydraulics struggling to move control surfaces. Warning alarms screamed as something struck the right wing. A new damage indicator flashed red on her console. Fuel line compromised. Fire warning. Taking fire eastern ridge. She reported, her voice betraying none of the fear that surged through her. Engaging. Emma forced the wounded aircraft around, lining up the eastern ridge in her sights. The cannon roared one final time, a 3-second burst that silenced the enemy position permanently. Second medevac lifting off, Carter reported. All critical wounded evacuated. Emma checked her systems. The fire warning continued to flash, joined now by additional alerts. Hydraulic pressure critical. Fuel pressure dropping. Engine temperature rising on the right side. The A-10 could absorb punishment like no other aircraft, but even it had limits. She had perhaps minutes before systems failed completely. Thunderbolt 3 RTB immediately. Harrison's voice cut through the warnings. Your aircraft is showing critical damage on our telemetry. Not yet, Emma replied, watching the second medevac climb away from the ravine. SEAL extraction still in progress. Captain Mitchell, this is a direct order. Return to base now. Emma ignored the command, focusing on the battlefield below. The SEAL team was preparing for their own extraction, the remaining men forming a perimeter around the ravine as they awaited transport helicopters. Enemy movement all ridge lines, she warned, spotting multiple groups attempting to close in now that the medevac birds were clear. They're trying to overwhelm the position before final extraction. She had one bomb remaining, one last card to play. Trident Actual, I'm dropping my final GBU-12 on the northern approach to create a barrier. Prepare for extraction from the southern corridor only. Copy Thunderbolt, southern extraction only. Emma designated the target area with clinical precision. The bomb fell away from the aircraft, guiding itself to the exact coordinates she had selected. The explosion transformed the northern approach into a debris field that would slow any enemy advance. Northern approach denied. Extraction birds inbound. ETA 3 minutes. Below, the SEAL team tightened their perimeter, all faces turned outward as they prepared for the final phase of their ordeal. They had suffered, bled, nearly died in this valley, but they would go home alive. All 81 of them. Emma circled one last time, the A-10 shuddering beneath her as systems continued to degrade. The fire warning had intensified. The right engine was losing power. The hydraulic system was on the verge of complete failure. F-16's on station, a new voice announced over the radio. Thunderbolt 3, you are relieved. RTB immediately. Through her canopy, Emma saw the sleek shapes of 2 F-16 Fighting Falcons arrive overhead. The cavalry, finally. Copy that, she acknowledged. Trident Actual, you have F-16 coverage now. I'm RTB. Carter's voice came back, stripped of its professional detachment for the first time. Thunderbolt 3, Trident Actual. You saved us today, all of us. We won't forget. Just doing my job, Trident. Emma banked the damaged A-10 toward Bagram. Get home safe. As she turned away from the valley, the full extent of her aircraft's damage became apparent. The right wing was visibly mangled, a steady stream of fuel vaporizing behind it. The control response continued to degrade, requiring constant correction to maintain level flight. Base Thunderbolt 3, inbound with significant battle damage. Request emergency recovery procedures. Copy Thunderbolt 3, Harrison replied. Runway is clear. Fire crews standing by. Your approach vector is 190. Emma checked her instruments. Bagram was 40 miles away. At her current airspeed, that meant 15 minutes of flight time. The question was whether the A-10's damaged systems would last that long. She throttled back on the right engine, trying to reduce the fire risk. The aircraft immediately yawed in response, requiring constant left rudder to maintain course. The control stick felt increasingly loose in her hand as hydraulic pressure continued to bleed away. Thunderbolt 3, what's your status? Harrison asked, concern evident in his voice. Manageable, Emma replied, though the words stretched the truth. The old girl's tough, but she's hurting. In truth, the aircraft was approaching unflyable. The right engine was now producing less than 50% power. The primary hydraulic system had failed completely, leaving only the backup system, which was itself compromised. The fuel gauge for the right wing tank showed a rapid decrease as fuel continued to vent from damaged lines. But none of that mattered. The mission was accomplished. SEAL Team 7 was safe. The wounded were evacuated. The remaining men would be extracted under F-16 cover. 81 Americans would go home to their families. Whatever happened next, court-martial discharged criminal charges, Emma had made her peace with it the moment she had climbed into the cockpit. Some prices were worth paying. As the mountains gave way to the flatter terrain surrounding Bagram, Emma felt a curious detachment. The pain in her arm had faded to a dull throb. The warnings blaring through the cockpit seemed distant, unimportant. What mattered was bringing the 297 home. Her father's aircraft, the old warrior that had saved American lives in 2 wars separated by decades but united by purpose. Thunderbolt 3, you're trailing smoke, Harrison warned. Fire indication on your right wing. Copy that. Emma could see the black plume now streaming behind her like a battle flag. 5 minutes to touchdown. The backup hydraulic system chose that moment to fail completely. The control stick went slack in her hand, the aircraft immediately rolling right as the damaged wing lost lift. Emma reacted instinctively, using differential thrust to compensate. More power to the left engine, less to the right. The A-10 grudgingly responded, leveling its wings. Hydraulics gone, she reported calmly. Flying on engines only now. There was a pause before Harrison replied. Understood. Crash crews repositioning for approach from the north. Recommend you eject captain. Negative, I can bring her in. Flying without hydraulics wasn't impossible in an A-10. Difficult, demanding, but not impossible. The aircraft had been designed with redundancies specifically for this scenario. Mechanical linkages could allow limited control of essential surfaces. Differential thrust could compensate for much of the rest. Emma focused entirely on the task, shutting out the warnings, the pain, the consequences that awaited her on the ground. There was only the aircraft, the sky, and the approaching runway. 3 minutes to touchdown, she reported. Request all traffic clear airspace. Airspace clear, Thunderbolt 3, you are #1 priority. The Bagram runway appeared ahead, a concrete strip amid the Afghan desert. Emergency vehicles positioned along its length, red lights flashing in the gathering dusk. A reception committee for a wounded warrior and its pilot. Emma lined up her approach as best she could with the limited controls available. Airspeed, attitude, descent rate. Each required constant adjustment using engine power alone. The A-10 shuddered and bucked beneath her, the damaged systems protesting every command. 1 minute to touchdown, gear down. She reached for the landing gear lever, pulling it down. The indicator lights remained dark. The emergency extension system was hydraulic. With no hydraulic pressure, the gear would not deploy. Negative gear indication, she reported. Attempting emergency extension. Emma activated the manual release, feeling resistance as the mechanical system tried to overcome the lack of hydraulic assistance. The nose gear indicator flashed green. The left main gear followed. The right remained stubbornly red. 2 green, 1 red, right main gear unconfirmed. Copy Thunderbolt 3. Number 3, crash crew standing by, recommend ejection. Emma made her decision. Negative ejection, coming in with what I've got. The runway threshold passed beneath her as she eased the A-10 down, balancing on the razor's edge between control and chaos. The aircraft touched down on its nose gear and left main, the right wing held high through differential thrust. For a moment, it seemed to work. The A-10 rolled straight, decelerating as Emma applied maximum braking to the functioning left gear. Then physics asserted itself. As airspeed bled away, the right wing lost its artificial lift. The aircraft tilted, the damaged right wing dropping toward the concrete. Metal screamed as the wingtip contacted the runway, sending a shower of sparks cascading behind. The A-10 slewed sideways, spinning in a half circle, before coming to rest amid a cloud of smoke and dust. Warning sirens blared across the base as crash crews raced toward the downed aircraft. Inside the cockpit, Emma sat motionless, the sudden silence deafening after the chaos of the landing. She was alive. The aircraft was destroyed, but she was alive. And so were 81 American special operators who should have died in a valley 40 miles away. She reached up with her good arm, popping the canopy release. Desert air rushed in, carrying the scent of smoke fuel and overheated metal. Through the settling dust, she could see vehicles approaching, emergency lights painting the scene in alternating red and white. Emma unbuckled her harness, wincing as pain lanced through her injured arm. Blood had soaked the flight suit sleeve, the fabric stiff and dark. Not serious, but not trivial either. She would need medical attention. After she faced the consequences of her actions. As she climbed awkwardly from the ruined cockpit, Emma saw figures running toward her across the tarmac. In front, Major Reynolds, his face set in an unreadable expression. Beside him, Colonel Harrison, limping slightly in his haste. And behind them, a silver-haired man in a pressed uniform that marked him as someone from higher command. Emma dropped to the ground, her legs unexpectedly weak. She straightened her spine, raising her hand in a salute despite the pain that shot through her injured arm. Captain Emma Mitchell, returning to base as ordered, sir. Reynolds returned the salute, his expression softening as he took in her bloodied sleeve and the destroyed A-10 behind her. At ease, Captain. He glanced at the aircraft, then back to her. That was some flying. Thank you, sir. The silver-haired man stepped forward. Captain Mitchell, I'm Inspector General Hayes. You've created quite a situation here. Emma met his gaze steadily. Yes, sir. You disobeyed direct orders, took an aircraft without authorization, engaged in combat operations outside approved parameters. Yes, sir, I did. Hayes studied her for a long moment, then looked past her to the smoking wreckage of the A-10. You also saved 81 American lives today, while sustaining injuries yourself. The aircraft took most of the damage, sir. A ghost of a smile touched Hayes' lips. So, I see. He turned to Reynolds. Major, get this officer to medical immediately. We'll discuss the rest tomorrow. Yes, sir. Reynolds gestured to the waiting ambulance. As medical personnel approached with a stretcher, Harrison moved to Emma's side. You did good, kid, he said quietly. Your father would be proud. Emma felt tears threatening for the first time since the mission began. The adrenaline was fading, reality asserting itself. The 297 is destroyed. Harrison shook his head. Aircraft can be rebuilt. Lives can't. He squeezed her uninjured shoulder. Rest now. The fight's over. As the medics helped her onto the stretcher, Emma looked back at the ruined A-10. Smoke still curled from its damaged wing, the titanium airframe bent but unbroken, like its pilot. The consequences would come tomorrow. The debriefings, the investigations, perhaps the end of her career. But tonight, 81 Americans were alive who should have died, and that was enough. More than enough. Darkness had fallen over Bagram Air Base by the time the medical team finished with Emma. The field hospital hummed with quiet efficiency, staff moving between beds, where the wounded from the Korangal operation lay recovering. 8 SEAL team members occupied the far wing, their injuries ranging from shrapnel wounds to a collapsed lung. They had been the fortunate ones evacuated early, thanks to Emma's intervention. The doctor finished bandaging Emma's arms, securing the final strip of tape with practiced precision. 14 stitches, Captain. You're lucky the shrapnel missed the major blood vessels. Emma nodded, flexing her fingers experimentally. The local anesthetic deadened most of the pain, but a dull throb remained a reminder of how close the cockpit penetration had been to something far worse. When can I be cleared for duty? The doctor, a weathered major with salt and pepper hair, raised an eyebrow. That's assuming there is duty to return to captain. Word travels fast around here. Emma met his gaze steadily. Until I'm told otherwise, I'm still an Air Force officer. Fair enough. The doctor made a notation in her chart. Keep the wound clean and dry. Change dressings daily. No flight operations for at least 7 days, assuming you still have wings by then. He hesitated, then added, for what it's worth, the SEAL team commander has been asking about you. Says they owe you a debt. Before Emma could respond, the curtains surrounding her treatment bay parted. Colonel Harrison stepped in, his face etched with fatigue, but his eyes alert. How's our pilot, Doc? Stubborn like all you flight jockeys. The doctor gathered his supplies. She'll live, though that arm needs rest. Harrison nodded his thanks as the doctor departed, then turned to Emma. How are you really feeling? Like I crashed a $30 million aircraft. Emma attempted a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Any word on the SEAL team? All accounted for. The last extraction birds touched down 40 minutes ago. Harrison pulled up a stool sitting beside her bed. 81 men alive, thanks to you. Emma absorbed this news quietly, letting it settle against the weight of what she had done. Disobeyed orders, stolen an aircraft, destroyed government property. Yet 81 Americans were alive who might otherwise have perished. What happens now, sir? Harrison's weathered face revealed nothing. Inspector General Hayes has called a formal review for 0800 tomorrow. Major Reynolds, myself, you and representatives from SOCOM will attend. Court-martial, possible. Harrison didn't sugarcoat it. But not certain. There are complicating factors, such as Lieutenant Carter submitting an official statement that your actions saved his entire unit, such as Admiral Hollister, head of Special Operations Command, personally calling the Air Force Chief of Staff. Harrison leaned forward, lowering his voice. And such as the fact that the intelligence failure that put SEAL Team 7 in that trap is a much bigger scandal than one pilot breaking the rules to save them. Emma processed this information, weighing possibilities and outcomes. I'm prepared to accept responsibility for my actions, sir. I know you are. That's part of what makes you a good officer. Harrison stood, wincing slightly as his aging knees protested. Get some rest, Captain. Tomorrow will be challenging enough without sleep deprivation. As he turned to leave, Emma called after him. Colonel Harrison, thank you for everything. The old pilot paused, glancing back with a faint smile. Just paying forward a debt, Captain. Your father did the same for me once. After Harrison departed, Emma settled back against the thin hospital pillow, her mind racing despite her exhaustion. She had achieved the mission, saved American lives against overwhelming odds. Yet the price remained to be determined. She closed her eyes, seeking sleep that refused to come easily. Outside her window, the distant sound of helicopter rotors announced another arrival. Perhaps the F-16s returning from their Overwatch mission. Perhaps more wounded being evacuated from remote outposts. The endless rhythm of war continued, heedless of individual triumphs or failures. And the review board convened precisely at 0800 hours in Bagram's Central Administration Building. Emma arrived 15 minutes early, her dress uniform immaculate despite the bandaged arm visible beneath her sleeve. She had slept little, rising before dawn to prepare herself both mentally and physically for what was to come. The room was arranged with military precision, a long table at the front for senior officers, a single chair facing them for the subject of inquiry, additional seating along the walls for observers and participants. The American flag stood in one corner, a reminder of what all present had sworn to defend. Major Reynolds arrived next, his uniform equally crisp, his expression unreadable as he nodded to Emma. Captain Mitchell. Major Reynolds. Emma came to attention despite her injury. At ease. Reynolds studied her for a moment. How's the arm? Functional, sir. Good. He seemed about to say more, then thought better of it, moving to take his assigned seat. Colonel Harrison entered alongside Inspector General Hayes, the two older men deep in quiet conversation. They separated upon entering the room, Harrison offering Emma an encouraging nod, while Hayes maintained professional detachment. The final arrivals surprised Emma. Lieutenant Marcus Carter and two other members of SEAL Team 7 entered, still wearing desert camouflage rather than dress uniforms. Carter's face bore the fading marks of combat, a healing cut above one eye, a bruise along his jawline. Their presence had not been mentioned in the official notification. At precisely 0800, Hayes called the proceedings to order. This review board is convened to examine the actions of Captain Emma Mitchell, 455th Air Expeditionary Wing, on April 17th during Operation Steadfast Vengeance. Hayes spoke with the measured precision of a man who had conducted dozens of such inquiries. Captain Mitchell is alleged to have violated direct orders, commandeered an A-10 aircraft without authorization, and engaged in combat operations outside approved parameters. He paused, surveying the room. The purpose of this review is to establish facts, determine appropriate accountability, and make recommendations regarding further proceedings if warranted. Emma sat ramrod straight, her expression composed as Hayes continued. Captain Mitchell, do you understand the nature of this review? Yes, sir. And do you wish to make any preliminary statement before we proceed? Emma had considered this question through the long night hours. Only that I accept full responsibility for my decisions and actions, sir. Hayes nodded, making a notation on the pad before him. So noted. Major Reynolds, as Captain Mitchell's commanding officer, please provide your account of the events in question. Reynolds stood, his posture military perfect. Sir, on April 17th at approximately 14:05 hours, SEAL Team 7 reported coming under heavy enemy fire in the Korengal Valley. They requested immediate close air support. Available air assets were either refueling or prohibited from engaging due to proximity of enemy forces to friendly positions. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Captain Mitchell requested permission to provide support with an A-10. I denied this request based on established protocols requiring experienced pilots for danger close operations. Captain Mitchell subsequently left the operations center without authorization. At 14:23 hours, she took off an A-10 tail number 297 without clearance or flight plan. Did you issue direct orders for her not to fly? Hayes asked. I did, sir, multiple times, both before her departure and via radio after she was airborne. And her response? Reynolds hesitated. She acknowledged my orders but continued her mission to support SEAL Team 7. Hayes made another notation. Colonel Harrison, as technical advisor and senior officer present during these events, what is your assessment? Harrison rose slowly, his age more apparent in the morning light streaming through the windows. Sir, Captain Mitchell identified a critical threat to American forces and took decisive action when conventional responses proved inadequate. While her methods violated protocol, her tactical assessment was proven entirely correct. Are you suggesting her insubordination was justified, Colonel? I'm stating that her actions saved 81 American lives, sir. Harrison's voice carried the weight of decades of command experience. The results speak for themselves. Hayes turned his attention to Carter. Lieutenant, as commander of SEAL Team 7, what is your perspective on this incident? Carter stood, his movements betraying the stiffness of recent combat. Sir, my unit was ambushed by a numerically superior force with commanding positions on 3 ridgelines. We had wounded personnel and dwindling ammunition. Without Captain Mitchell's intervention, I estimate we would have sustained at least 70% casualties, possibly total loss. And the quality of her close air support, exceptional, sir. Carter's voice carried absolute conviction. She placed fire within 25 meters of friendly positions without a single friendly casualty. She systematically eliminated enemy heavy weapons, created a corridor for our movement to defensible terrain, and remained on station despite aircraft damage. In 20 years of special operations, I've never seen more precise or effective close air support. Hayes absorbed this testimony without visible reaction. Captain Mitchell, please describe your decision-making process. Emma rose, ignoring the twinge from her injured arm. Sir, I assessed that SEAL Team 7 faced imminent destruction without immediate air support. The terrain configuration created a natural kill zone exactly as I had warned during mission planning. With no other assets capable of providing the necessary support, I determined that immediate A-10 intervention represented their only survival chance. You were aware your actions violated direct orders. Yes, sir. Yet you proceeded anyway. Emma met his gaze directly. I did, sir. The alternative was to watch 81 Americans die while following procedures that were inadequate for the situation. A convenient justification for insubordination, Captain. No, sir. A difficult choice between competing obligations. Emma's voice remained steady. My oath requires me to obey the orders of those appointed over me. It also requires me to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies. American lives were at stake. I made my decision accordingly. The room fell silent as Hayes considered her words. Captain Mitchell, you destroyed a $30 million aircraft. Yes, sir. The A-10 sustained battle damage during the engagement. I elected to attempt recovery rather than ejection to preserve a valuable asset, risking your life in the process. The A-10 is designed to sustain significant damage and remain flyable, sir. I judge the risk acceptable. Hayes leaned back, studying her with new intensity. You seem remarkably calm about potentially ending your career, Captain. For the first time, Emma allowed a hint of emotion to surface. With respect, sir, my career concerns are secondary to the lives of American service members. I would make the same decision again, regardless of personal consequences. The Inspector General held her gaze for a long moment, then turned to his notes. This board will take a 30-minute recess to review additional documentation. We will reconvene at 09:45 hours. As the senior officers filed out, Emma returned to her seat, maintaining her composure despite the uncertainty churning beneath. Harrison approached, keeping his voice low. You're doing well. Stay steady. Yes, sir. After Harrison moved away, Lieutenant Carter approached, extending his hand. Captain Mitchell. Emma rose, accepting the handshake. Lieutenant, how are your men? Recovering. 8 wounded, but all will survive. Carter's grip was firm, his eyes conveying what words could not. What you did out there, there's no adequate way to thank you. No thanks necessary, Lieutenant. It's what the A-10 was built for. Carter released her hand, a faint smile touching his lips. My men have started calling that ravine Mitchell's Run. I suspect the name will stick. Before Emma could respond, the door opened as Hayes and the other senior officers returned. The 30-minute recess had lasted barely 15. Everyone resumed their positions as Hayes called the review back to order. After examining the evidence and testimony presented, this board has reached several preliminary conclusions. Hayes spoke with formal precision. First, it is evident that Captain Mitchell violated direct orders and military protocol. These violations cannot be dismissed regardless of outcome. Emma maintained her stoic expression, prepared for the worst. Second, Hayes continued, it is equally evident that her actions directly resulted in saving 81 American lives under circumstances where conventional responses had proven inadequate. He paused, looking directly at Emma. Third, information has come to light regarding significant intelligence failures that place SEAL Team 7 in an untenable position, despite prior warnings, including those raised by Captain Mitchell herself. This revelation sent a ripple through the room. Emma kept her expression neutral, though inwardly she wondered what exactly had been discovered. In light of these factors, Hayes said, this board makes the following recommendations. Captain Mitchell will receive a formal reprimand for violation of direct orders and unauthorized use of military aircraft. This reprimand will be placed in her permanent record. Emma accepted this expected outcome with a slight nod. However, Hayes continued, no further disciplinary action is recommended. Captain Mitchell will be reassigned effective immediately to the Close Air Support Development Program at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, where her experience and tactical innovations can be properly evaluated for potential doctrine modification. Emma blinked, struggling to process this unexpected turn. Reassignment rather than discharge. A reprimand rather than court-martial. Furthermore, Hayes added, this board recommends a comprehensive review of close air support protocols in complex terrain environments with specific attention to minimum engagement distances when American forces face imminent destruction. He closed his folder with a decisive motion. These recommendations will be forwarded to the appropriate command authorities for final disposition. This review is concluded. As the participants rose, Reynolds approached Emma. His expression had softened from its earlier rigidity. Captain Mitchell. Sir. Reynolds hesitated, seeming to weigh his words carefully. I was wrong about you. I saw risk where there was preparation. He extended his hand. That's on me. Emma accepted the gesture, recognizing the significance of this admission from a superior officer. I was out of my lane, sir. That's on me. Then let's redraw the lanes where they should have been. Reynolds released her hand. The Close Air Support Development Program needs officers who can think beyond the manual. Your experience will be valuable there. Thank you, sir. As Reynolds moved away, Harrison approached a satisfied expression on his weathered face. Well done, Captain. They're not court-martialing me, Emma said, still processing the outcome. No, they're not. Though I suspect that has more to do with the classified intelligence failure Hayes mentioned than any mercy toward you. Harrison lowered his voice. Sergeant Jenkins' concerns about encrypted communications were validated. Someone knew SEAL Team 7 was coming. The investigation into that breach will make your unauthorized flight look like a parking ticket. Emma absorbed this information thoughtfully. So I'm useful as a distraction. You're useful as an exceptional pilot who proved the doctrine needs updating. Harrison smiled. Take the win, Captain. They don't come often in this business. 6 months later, Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, Arizona. The desert sun beat down on the flight line where 6 A-10 Thunderbolts sat in precise formation. Their pilots, a mix of veterans and trainees, gathered around a portable whiteboard where Emma stood pointing to topographical maps of mountainous terrain. The valley creates natural channelization, she explained, her voice carrying across the assembled group. Standard doctrine says maintain minimum distance of 100 meters from friendly forces. But what happens when the enemy is within 50 meters and closing? A young lieutenant raised his hand. The manual says withdraw and reassess, ma'am. And if withdrawal means leaving American forces to die, the lieutenant hesitated. Then the manual is wrong. Emma nodded, pleased with the answer. The manual isn't wrong so much as incomplete. It was written for conventional warfare in European theaters. Mountains changed the equation. She turned to a new page showing aerial photographs of the Korengal Valley. Read the terrain like a book. Every fold is a word, every ridgeline a sentence, every valley a paragraph. If you can't recite it from 12 angles, you don't know it well enough. The class continued for another hour, combining technical precision with practical experience. Emma had developed a reputation over the past 6 months. Demanding but fair, technical, but practical, by the book only when the book made sense. As the pilots dispersed to their aircraft for the practical portion of the training, Colonel Harrison approached from the observation area. Though officially retired, he had accepted a civilian consultant position with the Close Air Support Development Program. Good class, Captain. He fell into step beside her as they walked toward her aircraft. Your gun discipline module is being adopted Air Force-wide. The concept of taps, not streams, is revolutionizing close air support doctrine. Emma accepted the praise with a professional nod. The pilots are learning. That's what matters. They reached her aircraft, a newly refurbished A-10 with tail number 297. Not the same airframe she had crashed at Bagram, but rebuilt using salvageable components and given the same designation. A small gesture of respect from Air Force leadership that spoke volumes about how the winds had shifted. Harrison watched as ground crew completed pre-flight checks. Admiral Hollister is visiting next week. Wants to see your training program firsthand. The program belongs to the Air Force, not me, Emma demurred. False modesty doesn't suit you, Captain. Harrison's weathered face creased in a smile. Your tactical innovations have changed how we approach mountain warfare. Mitchell's Run is now taught at the Air Force Academy as a case study in emergency extraction under fire. Emma adjusted her flight suit, uncomfortable with the recognition. I just did what needed doing. As did your father before you. Harrison handed her a small package wrapped in cloth. Speaking of whom, I've been meaning to give you this. Emma unwrapped the cloth, revealing a metal fragment approximately the size of her palm. Scorched and twisted, it nevertheless clearly showed part of an aircraft serial number. This is from your father's A-10, the original 297. Harrison's voice softened with memory. After he went down in Iraq, I kept this piece. Thought you should have it now. Emma ran her fingers over the metal, feeling the connection across time and space to the father she had lost too soon. Thank you, sir. This means everything. He always said the same thing I've heard you tell your students. It's not the aircraft that saves lives, it's the pilot. A call from the flight line interrupted the moment. Captain Mitchell aircraft is ready. Emma carefully rewrapped the metal fragment, tucking it into her pocket. Duty calls. Always does. Harrison stepped back. I'll watch from the tower. Try not to show off too much for the new kids. Emma smiled as she climbed into the cockpit, the familiar surroundings welcoming her like an old friend. As she strapped in and began pre-flight checks, her mind wandered briefly to the men of SEAL Team 7. They had all survived their ordeal in the Korengal. The wounded had recovered. Lieutenant Carter had received a Silver Star for his leadership under fire. He still sent occasional messages through military channels, updates on his team, or questions about air support tactics. In the aftermath, the intelligence failure that had compromised their mission had been traced to a contractor with divided loyalties. The resulting investigation had quietly reshaped operational security protocols throughout the theater. Lives would be saved by lessons learned from near tragedy. Emma completed her checklist and signaled readiness to the tower. As clearance came through, she advanced the throttles, feeling the powerful aircraft respond to her touch. The A-10 rolled forward, gathering speed before lifting gracefully into the Arizona sky. Today's training mission was complex simulated close air support in mountainous terrain with minimal separation between friendly and enemy forces. Exactly the scenario she had faced in Afghanistan, now being taught systematically to ensure others would be prepared when similar circumstances arose. Emma banked toward the training range, the desert landscape unfolding beneath her. In the 6 months since Korengal, she had found her purpose in a way she hadn't anticipated. Not just flying combat missions, but reshaping how those missions were conceived and executed. Saving lives not only in the immediate sense, but through the pilots she trained. Her father would have understood, perhaps had even followed a similar path had he lived. As the training range came into view, Emma pushed these reflections aside, focusing on the mission at hand. Through her headset, the voices of student pilots checked in, eager and nervous in equal measure. All aircraft, this is Instructor Mitchell, she transmitted. Today, we're practicing danger close support in mountainous terrain. Remember your training, read the terrain control, your gun, protect your friendlies. Questions. When none came, Emma smiled faintly. Then let's begin. Yeah. 2 weeks later, Arlington National Cemetery. The early morning mist clung to the endless rows of white headstones, shrouding the hallowed ground in solemn stillness. Emma walked the familiar path, her dress uniform immaculate, a small bouquet of flowers in her hand. She had visited this place many times over the years, but today felt different, a completion of sorts, a circle closing. Her father's grave lay in Section 60 among others who had fallen in service to their country. The headstone was simple like thousands of others. Name, rank, dates of birth and death decorations. The formal record of a life given in service. Mitchell Jack T. Major, United States Air Force Silver Star, Distinguished Flying Cross, beloved husband and father above and beyond. Emma placed the flowers carefully, then stood at attention, rendering a crisp salute. Protocol didn't require this gesture for a family visit, but some things transcended regulations. Hello, Dad, she said softly as she relaxed her posture. It's been quite a year. The one-sided conversation felt natural after so many visits. She told him about Korengal, about the A-10's performance, about the SEAL team that had survived against overwhelming odds. She described the new training program she was developing and the changes to air support doctrine that were being implemented based on her experience. Colonel Harrison gave me a piece of your aircraft, she continued, removing the metal fragment from her pocket. Said you always told him it's not the plane that saves lives, it's the pilot. The morning breeze stirred the trees overhead, sunlight beginning to pierce the mist as the day awakened. I understand now what you meant. Why you did what you did in Iraq. Emma's voice caught slightly. There are moments when the rulebook fails and all that stands between life and death is one person willing to act. You taught me that even though you weren't there to say it. She placed the metal fragment temporarily on the headstone, removing from her other pocket a small velvet box. Opening it revealed the Distinguished Flying Cross, awarded posthumously for her actions in the Korengal. They gave me this last week, said it was for extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight. She smiled faintly. Bureaucratic language for doing what needed doing. Emma removed the medal from its case, studying the bronze cross with its propeller in the center. I thought you should have it, not literally, of course, but... She hesitated, searching for words. This belongs to your legacy as much as to me. She returned the medal to its case, then picked up the metal fragment, holding both in her palm. Two pieces of the same story, your chapter and mine. After a moment of silence, she returned both items to her pockets. I have to go. New group of pilots starting training tomorrow. Hard cases, most of them. Think they know everything. Her smile turned wry. Remind you of anyone. In the distance, a bugler began playing taps, marking the beginning of another funeral. The haunting notes drifted across the cemetery, a reminder of sacrifice's eternal presence in military life. Emma came to attention, once more rendering a final salute. I love you, Dad. Thank you for showing me the way even when you weren't here to lead. As she turned to leave, she noticed a figure standing some distance away. Colonel Harrison, dressed in civilian clothes, waiting respectfully. He had offered to accompany her to Arlington, but had understood when she asked to visit her father's grave alone first. Emma walked toward him, her steps measured across the hallowed ground. How are you doing, Captain? Harrison asked as she approached. I'm good, sir. Better than I expected. They began walking together toward the cemetery exit, passing row after row of identical white markers. Your father came here once, Harrison said after a while. After Desert Storm, said he needed to remind himself what it was all about. And did he find what it was all about? Harrison nodded slowly. He did. Said it wasn't about politics or oil or even defeating the enemy. It was about the man or woman next to you, making sure they got home. Emma considered this as they continued walking. Is that why you helped me at Bagram, because of him? Partially, Harrison admitted, but mostly because you were right. Those men needed help, and you were the only one who could provide it. He glanced at her. The fact that you're Jack Mitchell's daughter just made it poetic. They reached the cemetery gates, pausing before returning to the world beyond. The new training cycle starts tomorrow, Emma said, changing the subject. 20 pilots, all experienced but new to the A-10. They're lucky to have you as an instructor. I'm still learning myself. Harrison smiled at that. The best teachers always are. 3 years later, Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada. The Red Flag exercise was the most realistic combat training in the world. Dozens of aircraft, hundreds of personnel, and thousands of square miles of desert transformed into a simulated battle space, where pilots and ground forces practiced the art of modern warfare. Major Emma Mitchell, recently promoted and now commanding her own A-10 squadron, stood before her pilots in the briefing room. The mission today was complex close air support for Special Operations Forces infiltrating a heavily defended valley. The scenario eerily echoed her experience in the Korengal, intentionally so. Remember your training, she told the assembled pilots. Gun discipline is critical. Short bursts, precise placement. Let dust be your smokescreen, not your blindfold. The pilots nodded, absorbing her guidance. Some were veterans, others new to the platform. All respected the woman who had rewritten close air support doctrine through both heroism and intellectual rigor. The Special Operations team will be marking positions with IR strobes. Maintain positive identification of friendly forces at all times. Emma highlighted key terrain features on the digital map. Remember to read the terrain. Every fold, every ridgeline tells you something if you know how to listen. After completing the briefing and answering questions, Emma dismissed the pilots to prepare for the mission. As they filed out, a senior officer entered. General Reynolds, formerly Major Reynolds, now commanding the Air Combat Command. Major Mitchell. He nodded as the room cleared. A word. Of course, sir. Emma remained at the briefing station as the last pilots departed. Reynolds approached, studying the mission map still displayed on the screen. Red flag scenario looks familiar. Intentionally so, sir. The Korengal operation provided valuable lessons. We're incorporating them into standard training. Good. Reynolds turned to face her directly. I'll be observing today's exercise personally, along with some guests. Emma raised an eyebrow. Guests, sir. SOCOM representatives. They're implementing your close air support protocols for all their operations. Reynolds allowed himself a rare smile. Your little act of insubordination has transformed how we conduct joint operations in complex terrain. Hardly little, sir. I recall the aircraft repair bill was substantial. Reynolds chuckled. True enough, but cheap at the price of 81 lives. He gestured toward the door. Your pilots are waiting, Major. I won't keep you. Thank you, sir. Emma gathered her materials, preparing to leave. One more thing, Reynolds added. Colonel Harrison sends his regards. Says to tell you he's enjoying retirement in Montana, though he misses watching you train the next generation. Emma smiled at the mention of her mentor. Please tell him I miss his expertise and his stories. I will. Reynolds paused. He also mentioned that your father would be proud of what you've built here. I find myself in complete agreement. The unexpected sentiment caught Emma by surprise. Thank you, sir. That means a great deal. As Emma walked to the flight line where her squadron prepared for the day's mission, She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from the desperate battle in the Korangal to reshaping air support doctrine, from near court-martial to squadron command, from daughter seeking to honor her father's legacy to pioneer creating her own. Her A-10 waited on the tarmac, crew chiefs completing final checks. Unlike the original 297, this aircraft bore a small, discreet marking beneath the cockpit, a stylized valley with the text, Mitchell's Run, in subdued lettering. A quiet acknowledgement permitted by regulations because it had become an official tactical term. Emma completed her pre-flight walk-around, running her hand along the aircraft's armored skin. The A-10 remained the same ungainly, beautiful machine it had always been. Not the most sophisticated platform in the Air Force inventory, but the absolute best tool when American lives were at stake on the ground. As she climbed into the cockpit, Emma felt the familiar sense of rightness of purpose fulfilled. The path had not been straight or easy, but it had led where she needed to go. She initiated the start sequence systems coming alive around her. Through her headset came the voices of her squadron, checking in one by one. Young pilots and veterans alike, each trained in the methods she had developed, refined and codified. All aircraft, this is Hog Lead, she transmitted once all had reported ready. Mission commencing as briefed. Remember why we're here. The unspoken understanding passed between them. Not for glory or adventure, not for politics or national policy, but for the sacred trust between those who fly and those who fight on the ground. The promise that when American forces faced their darkest hour, the A-10s would come bringing salvation on titanium wings. Emma advanced the throttles, feeling the powerful engines respond. The aircraft rolled forward, gathering speed before lifting into the clear Nevada sky. Her squadron followed in precise formation, a flying testament to preparation meeting opportunity. Below, the desert unfolded like a map of possibilities. Above, the boundless blue promised freedom. And ahead, the future waited to be written one mission at a time, just as her father would have wanted, just as she had always known it should be. Tiller. The sun was setting over Arlington National Cemetery as an elderly man made his way slowly along the rows of headstones in Section 60. Despite his age and the cane he leaned upon, William Wild Bill Harrison moved with the unmistakable bearing of a military officer. He stopped before a particular grave, standing at attention despite the protest from aging joints. The headstone was weathered now, having stood through many seasons of rain and snow, sun and wind. Yet the name remained clear, a permanent record of service and sacrifice. Mitchell Jack T. Major, United States Air Force. Harrison rendered a precise salute, holding it longer than protocol required. When he finally lowered his hand, he spoke quietly as if the occupant might hear. She did it, Jack. Everything we talked about that night in Kuwait, changing the doctrine, making sure close air support evolved beyond the textbook. He smiled faintly. Of course, she had to break a few rules along the way. Reminds me of someone else I used to fly with. From his pocket, Harrison removed a small, worn photograph. Two young A-10 pilots standing before their aircraft in the Arabian desert, arms slung over each other's shoulders, grins wide beneath the merciless sun. He studied it for a moment before returning it to his pocket. Your little girl saved 81 Americans that day in the Korangal, but her real achievement came after. The protocol she developed, the training methods she implemented, they've saved hundreds more since then, maybe thousands. He glanced toward the western sky where the sun painted the clouds in shades of gold and crimson. The colors of fire, of sacrifice, of glory, hard-won and justly earned. They're calling it the Mitchell Doctrine now. Required reading at the academy. Harrison chuckled softly. Can you imagine that stubborn second lieutenant? We knew his tactics, now enshrined in Air Force scripture. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves of nearby trees, the only response to his words. I kept my promise, old friend, watched over her as best I could. Harrison's voice grew softer. She found her own way, of course, just as you would have wanted. In the distance, a bugler began playing taps, the mournful notes drifting across the hallowed ground. Harrison stood straighter instinct, in training overcoming the weight of years. She's commanding the 355th Fighter Squadron now. They're deploying to Qatar next month. Pride colored his words. Best damn A-10 unit in the inventory according to CENTCOM, though I might be slightly biased. As the last notes of taps faded into silence, Harrison placed a hand briefly on the headstone. Rest easy, Jack. Your legacy is in good hands, the best hands. He turned away, moving carefully along the rows of identical white markers. An old warrior paying respect to fallen comrades while celebrating the continuation of their shared purpose through generations. Above a formation of aircraft passed high overhead, their distinctive silhouettes unmistakable, even at altitude. A-10 Thunderbolts returning from a training mission, their pilots unknowing witnesses to the quiet communion below. Harrison paused, looking up at the distant aircraft. A smile crossed his weathered face as he rendered one final salute to the sky. "Fly high, Mitchell," he whispered. "Fly high." The A-10s continued eastward, disappearing into the gathering dusk. But their message remained, carried on the wind that swept across Arlington's sacred ground. The promise endured. The legacy continued. And somewhere, perhaps, a father's spirit soared alongside his daughter's wings, proud beyond measure of the path she had forged. A path of honor, a path of courage, a path that transformed the rules when lives hung in the balance. Mitchell's Run,